Woo! 3, 2, 1. 1, 2, 3. What's happening, everybody? How's it going today? Tourhead Nordy with you. Fun stuff going on this week. The Osiris radio show with O'Teal and Mike. O'Teal of Dead and Company fame, and of course, Allman Brothers and everything he's done prior to that. And Mike, the stand-up comedian who's been doing the Comes a Time show with O'Teal for quite some time now, had Big Steve on their show yesterday. And it was interesting because they were speaking of how the Dead never had much fanfare on the stage. It was always just the equipment and the band. And it made me think that, it was interesting because we could always see everyone who worked for the band, not just the band. So most deadheads, especially during the 70s, I started in 1981, as most of you know by now, but I was ahead since like 78 or so when I was a little kid. But most people could see everything behind the Dead show. They weren't Kiss. They weren't Black Sabbath. There wasn't a giant curtain or a huge wall of Marshall stacks that were 20 feet tall that no one could see around. Every once in a while at those shows, which I saw many, many of, I am no stranger to other concerts. I've seen a stack everywhere. Motorhead, Danzig, everything from under the sun. But most bands have big stacks of Marshalls, big stacks of amps. You see one or two guys running around plugging another guitar in or bringing one out and setting it down. But you don't see what's going on behind that. The unique and super cool thing about the Grateful Dead is that although a lot of people think it's kind of boring because there's not a lot of shit behind there, you could see everybody. Like, I knew what most of the crew members looked like, even if I didn't know their name. Now, Big Steve, I always knew his name because Big Steve's Big Steve. But the other crew members, you would see them and recognize them and know, oh, those are the people who support the Dead. Those are the people who work for the Dead that help them make this whole thing fucking happen every single time. You would see them around, and we recognize them as much as we would the band members, It's interesting because you could see back there during shows since Big Steve, and there's Big Steve right there. That is a picture of Big Steve in the underwater suit that Grizzly Peaks made him when he was in Hawaii, talking about Jerry and him diving a while ago. And it's a special aquatic suit just for him so that he never has to put his joint out. But I do think that their logo would look really cool right on the front of it. Maybe they have it on there now. Next time he goes diving there, we'll see what... see if they got the logo on there. But anyway, speaking of underwater, Big Steve always seemed like the backstage shark fin because he was so much taller than everyone else. You could see all the other crew members working, but you could always see Big Steve kind of above the amps. And then later on, when the amps went from, or the PA went from being on the ground to being hoisted up in the 80s, you could see even more of the background, so we could see even more of the people. But yeah, Big Steve was the shark fin because he was a little taller and you could see his head, and he'd always be looking around and walking through the background. The cool, most unique thing about that is we really got to experience what everybody was doing and what everybody looked like and how they all made it happen. It's got to be a tough thing to run a crew and make the stage balance out and do all that other stuff. But it was really cool to hear those guys on the Comes a Time podcast talking about it the other day. Big Steve got kind of in depth with it, which I think is amazing because his stories are super cool. And it's interesting that we do know the crew vicariously, of course, unless you know them personally, like we do, and how truly intimate it almost seems because we know what the crew looks like, and we always have. And you could always see them, and it was always a part of the show. It was like, oh, they're getting ready, or Big Steve's shark finning and kicking somebody off the stage. So yeah, I love that aspect of it, and not too many people talk about the fact that it wasn't a big giant production. There wasn't a curtain across the stage. There wasn't dun dun dun, except on New Year's where it all happens before everybody comes out. But most of the time, it was just, oh, Jerry's coming up the stairs over here. Phil's coming up around the back here to grab his bass. You could see him walking behind the amps before they even came out. If it was Ozzy, it would be like till it started, Crazy Train or whatever, and then Ozzy would come out after it started playing. Our experience, always far different. I always enjoy the crazy big rock and roll shows, like I said, because I do love other rock and roll, and I've seen a bazillion bands. But the Grateful Dead, because of their unique setup and their unique stage and their lack of pomp and circumstance, if you will, always allowed us to see a little bit further back into the scene. And I always loved that, and I still do love that. And I just wanted to talk about that today because it's one of my funnest aspects, is to really know what else is going on in the background, and not really have to see that show of, when they come out and when the screen drops and, when the flames come up, although I love that too. It just wasn't that way for the Dead, and I'm appreciative of that because we got to experience what we all experienced and what we all love in a totally unique and special way. So anyway, with that said, that's what I wanted to talk about today. I hope y'all feel the same way. I think it's just, a really cool thing, like I said, that we got to run it that way, and we got to see it that way, and we got to know it that way, and know the Dead and the crew that way. So if you like this, give me the thumbs up, do the like and all that shit that you're supposed to do, and we'll go from there. I will see you next time. I'm out. Have a great rest of your winter transition into spring, because it's getting there. February just turned the corner, and hopefully we'll see you at Ventura. We're out. Bye.